Brad, you ever make watermelon teeth?
I'm sorry, what?
Watermelon teeth. You take the watermelon rind.
Can I stop for a minute and ask, maybe the audience can help crowdsource some data? How many of these cold opens begin with some level of incredulous on my part?
It's probably 50%, I would guess, because either incredulous on your part or like surprised and excited on my part, right?
Some variation of I'm sorry, what? I'm sorry, what?
No, watermelon teeth. So watermelon teeth, you take the rind and you slice a little thin strip off about the size of your front teeth. And then you leave the pink bit intact, and you cut triangles out of the green end, and then you jam it up between your gums and your lip. And when you smile, it looks like you have horrible green and white pointy monster teeth.
You had too much time or not enough to occupy you on the farm, didn't you?
You have to make your own fun, Brad. We used to, okay. So we did this. This was a family outing at my parents' side of the family, my dad's side of the family. And whenever we all got together as a family, there was almost always a watermelon there. And someone would get the knife out and carve out watermelon teeth for the kids and also the adults at the end of the meal. Usually, I mean, in fairness, usually those involved like a bushel of crabs on a picnic table someplace and like some corn that had been wrapped up in aluminum foil and chucked on the grill. And a lot of beer, like really a lot of beer.
So I was going to ask if the adults were fairly inebriated at this point. Also, was this a Virginia? Surely you did not have crabs in Tennessee.
Crabs in Tennessee were a rare treat. We would often, if we went, one of my dad's friends lived in North Carolina. We'd go he would get crabs when we came to visit them often, if it was the right time of year. But usually crabs were a Virginia thing. And when I think back on it now and what the water quality in the Chesapeake Bay was probably like when I was a kid, it's amazing. My liver and I'm not riddled with horrible diseases as a result of eating crabs from the Chesapeake Bay.
Look, you're in luck. The liver is a regenerative organ.
That's true. But yeah, so we'd make watermelon teeth. We had a family reunion where somebody came down. The whole family came down to our house in Tennessee, and they brought a bunch of crabs. We did the normal thing, and then we all made watermelon teeth, and we took a family portrait. Like the family reunion picture was with everybody with watermelon teeth. And we did the whole thing with like the Olympus camera with the 3-second timer that clicked down and you put on the picnic table or a tripod or whatever. And everybody got in the picture. We took it to the photo place, and, kids these days don't remember this, but it used to be when you took your photos, you knew that the person was going to look at them because they had to look at them to develop them. And they'd always have something like nice to say about them. They're like, oh, it looks like you had a really nice vacation. I'm so jealous. I can't believe you went to, Carowinds or whatever. And they looked at it and were like, man, that family picture is fantastic. You guys look so good. Everybody looks so happy and like having such a big time. Just beautiful smiles all around. And we all had watermelon teeth in the picture, and she didn't notice.
Kids these days don't understand. You couldn't just take illicit photos of whatever back then.
Well, you could, but you had to know somebody or be able to develop your own business if you were going to take naughty pictures.
You had to be okay with at least one person seeing those things.
Also, every single 1 hour photo place had a folder full of keepers that they just made a dupe of.
What?
Oh yeah.
Oh man, sounds like you have inside knowledge.
It's just what I've been told, Brad. Just what I've been told. Welcome to Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod. I'm Will.
I'm Brad. Hello. Have you ever done the cut a hole in the watermelon and upend a bottle of vodka in it, or maybe Everclear if you've really got a death wish?
Yeah, the Everclear is what we did because we were bad at math, and also we had a smaller watermelon than I think you probably wanted for a pint of that stuff. It was a bad time, Brad.
Ooh, that sounds terrible. I don't think I've ever actually done that.
One of the all-time bangers was on my grandmother's birthday when she turned, I think, 88. We were at the lake on a boat, and people on the lake are neighborly, and one of our neighbors at the boathouse next to us. Boathouse in Tennessee is like a tenement floating on big styrofoam blocks.
Okay.
And one of our neighbors was like, "Oh, it's your birthday, Nora. Come on over. We got Jello shooters." So my 88-year-old British grandmother was standing on the dock doing Jello shooters.
That's
3 o'clock in the afternoon.
I can't process anything you were saying because I did not grow up in a drinking family.
Oh, was it like
I grew up in a
teetotalers,
relatively religious family, but nobody drank at family functions for the entirety of my childhood.
Well, okay, so I have come from a long line of mostly functional alcoholics. It's mostly why I don't drink. Like, I'll have a beer occasionally, but I don't drink a lot anymore. My grandmother's idea of a drink was to get, like a tablespoon of rum in a 12-ounce Coke with a little bit of lime. That was what she liked to drink.
Okay. Sensible.
She was from the not drinking side of my mom's side of the family. They were like, I'll have a cocktail, and it was always something with a splash in it, right? The other side of the family almost all have drinking problems. So, it's pros and cons. I'll take the not drinking, it turns out.
Yes. Speaking of pros and cons.
Yeah.
Putting an automated system in charge of global nuclear annihilation.
Well, look, there's a human element, right? That you got to cut out of the loop because they're unpredictable.
That's right.
Computers?
That's right.
Perfectly predictable, Brad. Nothing could go wrong.
Definitely. Well, it's true that they only do what you tell them. You just got to be really sure what it is you're telling them to do.
That is true. Brad, of course, is alluding to the seminal 1983 classic starring Matthew Broderick and Ali Sheedy, WarGames.
Yeah.
Made for $16 million, Brad. We could Kickstarter that today.
It's only been about not even 13 hours since I finished this movie for the first time.
I can't believe you've never seen this before. Also,
there's a lot of movies I have never seen.
That's true. You GameSpot guys were too busy playing video games to watch movies. See, magazine people, we had a lot of time to go to the movies, it turns out.
Yes, we were quite busy trying to get through games. Also, prior to working in video games, I still spent most of my time trying to play games or be on computers. So you to the exclusion of movies.
What you're saying is, like, you would have been sitting in your bedroom and you would have heard about a new upcoming title, like a Final Fantasy VII or something like that. And you would have started calling phone numbers in Japan.
Yes.
To try to hack into the system and get access to the game before anybody else did, or it was officially released.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm going to say real quick before we get into this, we've only done 3 movies, right? Hackers, Sneakers, and this.
As far as I'm concerned, they're the 3 greatest computer hacking movies of all time.
I'm going to say unequivocally the best of the 3.
Oh, I think
at least my favorite of the 3. So
this one has the benefit of being first, right? This is the first computer movie. I mean, people saw Tron, but Tron's a fantasy. It's not really about computers. This is a real, like, this. First off, this is a movie-ass movie. This is like a Cold War thriller kind of like there's intrigue, there's romance, there's Matthew Broderick looking very young despite the fact that he was 21. It is, and also I think this movie's probably held up as well, better than any of the other movies we've watched on this podcast so far.
That's kind of what I mean. This is like the most successful and well constructed major motion picture film, like Hackers, look, Hackers is Hackers. Okay.
Hackers,
and like Sneakers,
brilliant art, Brad, and I'll hear nothing else.
Sneakers is good, but a little goofy in spots. But like this movie just works.
And it's funny because the themes are as relevant today as they were, maybe more so than they were 40 years ago. I think, like, if you think about the idea of replacing humans with computers and the current dialogue and the fact that there's right now a SAG-AFTRA strike and a Writers Guild strike that is basically like one of the core things that they're striking because is they don't want the movie studios to be able to replace their roles with AI generated analogs. Like, we're having the same conversations now that we were 40 years ago. Yeah.
I mean, to expand, it's the idea of replacing people with computers that learn through iteration.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which, like, the premise of this movie just gets less outlandish the farther away from it we get.
Yeah. It's remarkable. I think, so worth mentioning. Scored 3 Oscar nominations for cinematography, best screenplay, and sound. It didn't win any of them. I think not winning the screenplay is a real crime. And the cinematography's, I don't remember what won cinematography in 83.
Scored the coveted 4 stars from Roger Ebert.
Yeah. The interesting thing he says that happened in this movie is, so it's a movie about avoiding nuclear annihilation in the early 80s. At the end of the movie, by the way, from this point on, spoilers, I guess, we're going to just talk about the whole movie.
There's probably not much point in listening to this if you haven't already seen WarGames.
It's a 40-year-old movie, so I don't want to hear any complaining about spoilers in the comments, y'all. The end of the movie, the computer famously says the only way to win the game is to not play at all, right? Talking about global thermonuclear war.
That's like the one thing I wish I hadn't known about going into this, but go on.
Well, audiences reportedly applauded. Like when I was looking up newspaper clippings and reviews of the movie, people were like applauding and cheering at the end of the movie.
It's like an amazing, and like, you know, it's cliche or trite these days, but like it's a pretty powerful observation for a computer to make about global destruction.
Well, and it's a power, like it's hard to remember now because we were both probably too young to really be aware being real, still a constant threat of nuclear war because we've made choices as species.
Yeah.
However, it was more impending, I think, for the people who were, you know, teenagers and older in the early 80s than we really can appreciate. Anyway, I have the last time I watched this movie, I think, was in either 2008 or 2013 for the 25th or 30th anniversary. I can't remember. I looked for old podcast notes and couldn't actually find them because I thought we talked about it and this is only a test, but I don't believe we did. It's a remarkable, like from the very beginning, that the cold open of like the silo, the missile silo, the establishing shots of the missile silo where they just drive out to a house and there's a secret door and elevators and all sorts of stuff where they're going down into the standoff crew is going down into the silo and gets locked into the bunker. And then there's a false alarm for all, or I guess it's a simulation at that point.
It's a test. Yeah. I was shocked how well this opening scene works, and also how maybe not quite consistent in tone it is with the rest of the movie is a bit lighthearted. You know, it's a bit of a romp, or especially in light of the subject matter. But this opening scene is like tense as hell. It's like taut and like gripping. You know, I was sort of on the edge of my seat watching this. It's all executed so well. Also, I don't know how realistic this base is at the beginning, but everything about the trappings of it is amazing. From like the secret entrance in the little house to the gigantic, you know, they're not pressurized doors, but they go through this like almost airlock looking thing. And
well, so like they hid the entrances to the missile silos for a long time. I don't know if they still were in the 80s.
I believe that actually happened. I think they just represent it really well with this two-way mirror and stuff.
So one of the interesting things about this, and I don't know if this is one of the scenes that was shot, but they changed directors after just a few days of work. The first director was, I think, Martin Brest. I can't remember. It's something Brest. Martin Brest. And he shot it. They fired him because it was too dark. It was too serious. Like he had shot the hacking scene, the first one with Ali Sheedy and Matthew Broderick in his bedroom when they're changing grades. And the person who ended up coming in to do the rest of the movie, John
Badham.
John Badham, thank you. Looked at that scene and was like, wait, there's something not right. Because it was shot like it was a taut Cold War thriller, right? It was thought like it was really super serious and they were like doing scary criminal stuff. And he came back and reshot it as like they were kids having fun. And it makes the whole thing work because they're clearly just playing with a computer, right? It's a new thing to both of them. Well, it's not a new thing to Matthew Broderick, but it's a new thing or David Lightman, the character. But it's a new thing to Ali Sheedy. And she's like, wait, you can do that? And he's just showing off. Like he's a boy trying to impress a girl who's hanging out in his bedroom. And she's the first person probably who's shown interest in what he likes to do outside of like his nerd friends who are at the university. And then like that really makes the whole thing work. The fascinating thing that I learned reading about this for this outing is that the script originally started as nothing to do with computers at all. Like the original pitch was it was about Stephen Hawking.
That blew my mind because like even I, not having seen WarGames, like for decades, have known this as the hacking movie, right? It's like it's the movie where Matthew Broderick hacks into a nuclear system. It's about hacking, right? But it sounds like it was the scientist aspect. It was actually the Stephen Falcon character.
You mean Stephen Hawking?
Yes. was apparently the actual genesis of the story was about a scientist and a protege and that whole thing.
Well, yeah, the idea was somebody saw the story. They learned the story of Stephen Hawking, right? One of the great minds of our time. And the idea that he could solve the universal field theory, but be so locked in because of ALS that he couldn't share that information with anyone was terrifying to them. And they wanted to do a story about a young kind of rebellious outsider who was, typical Hollywood stuff, who was misunderstood and was not living up to his potential because his environment wasn't supporting him. Right.
It's like extremely the Back to the Future setup as well. Like who knows how many other movies.
Yeah, exactly. And then they needed a way to get the kid from the suburbs to connect with the brilliant astrophysicist. And they were like, oh, they talked to a bunch of people. They went to the Stanford Research Institute and they were like, what about computers? They're like, there's all these kids, they're doing computer stuff. They're, connecting to systems. They're doing all this like kind of cutting edge computer stuff. Maybe that's the way to do it. And that was the genesis for the entire hacking, like the thing that the movie's famous for now.
Like they kind of fell backwards into both the hacking and the nuclear war aspects of this. Yeah.
And so just to be clear, like we hackers is foundational for people who are our age, I think, maybe a little bit younger even. Sneakers is fun, but kind of was telling people about something they already knew. This movie had to introduce the idea that computers could talk to each other. It had to introduce the idea that how computers work, and it did it in a reasonable way and without a whole lot of like unfortunate exposition. It really just jumps in and like they like literally people call war dialing or war driving when you're looking for Wi-Fi access points. And like that's a reference to WarGames.
That blew my mind. Like, first of all, I may have heard the term war dialing at some point, but the war driving was really the only one I knew, which is kind of the drive around and look for open Wi-Fi equivalent of the war dialing in this. But yeah, like finding out that the essentially colloquially it was renamed to war dialing because of this movie is crazy.
DEF CON, the hacker convention, is named DEF CON because of this movie.
Yes. Like it's some very influential stuff.
Kevin Mitnick said that he spent a year in solitary because a prosecutor told a judge that if he got access to a telephone, he could dial up NORAD and launch a nuke. Mitnick laughed in the courtroom. The judge believed it, and he spent a year in the hole.
Oops.
Right.
The classic, very haunting strategy game, DEF CON.
Yeah. 2006.
Have you ever played it?
Yeah, it's fantastic.
The introversion classic. Like it's basically a video game version of the NORAD scene.
He said he wanted to make the NORAD. They said they wanted to make the NORAD game.
Yeah, like it's everywhere. I mean, I like I said, I knew the only winning move is not to play line very well, of course, coming into this. Like the influential nature of this thing is kind of crazy.
Just to be clear, John Draper, who was known as Captain Crunch, the guy who figured out that you could use the 2600 hertz whistle that came in Captain Crunch boxes to bypass paying for phone calls, is attributed in a 2008 Wired retrospective. And he literally says, I called that scanning before the movie. It's called war dialing now because David Lightman used it in the movie to make contact with the NORAD computer.
Yeah, that's amazing. Some good freaking in this movie as well.
Yeah, the soda
and freaking
can,
adjacent,
the soda tab
stuff. Was that was the phone booth?
That was the phone booth one. I don't know if that actually worked. I'm curious if you could short it out that way.
Yeah, I wonder if that's one of those like we had to fictionalize it just enough so people wouldn't just go out and do it. But then there's also it's not a phone, but he kind of does the same thing acoustically with that door keypad.
Oh yeah, he records the touch tones of the keypad to figure out how to open the door, and then also hot wires it so that it'll no longer work when he goes out. It's pretty good. There's some crazy cameos from people who were relatively new actors in this movie. John Spencer was Jerry in the missile silo. He played the chief of staff on the West Wing and a bunch of other stuff over the years. the captain or the admiral in charge of Tom Cruise's aircraft carrier in Top Gun is one of the FBI agents.
Okay.
There were a couple other people that I recognized that I didn't get down to look up.
That's the guy you're talking about is also the principal from Back to the Future.
Also his name's James Tolkien. Was also the principal from all three Back to the Futures, or he's the marshal in the third one, I think.
There's another actor in this who it is killing me. Maybe somebody can help me out here. I don't know his name. He's a military officer that I think only has like one speaking scene or shot even.
Yeah.
Who I'm positive is a teacher or a principal from some sitcom or something. His voice is incredibly familiar. He basically has like one line where he's on the phone talking to somebody. I cannot find it.
He's an Air Force officer headset. That's the other one I was thinking. That's the other thing I was thinking. The other person I was thinking about. Apparently John Lennon they originally wanted to get John Lennon to be Dr. Faulkner, but he was shot before that happened, unfortunately.
That was kind of crazy to find out.
Jason Bernard, who was in like a ton of stuff, Liar Liar. He's been a character actor in a bazillion things. And was also in Wing Commander 4, The Price of Freedom as Captain William Eisen and Heart of the Tiger, the video ones. He shows up all over this. It's a pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it's a great cast.
Early 80s cast.
I glossed over Ali Sheedy in the credits at the beginning and then spent the entire movie not realizing that Jennifer is Ali Sheedy because I 98% know her from The Breakfast Club.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah,
where she plays such a different character.
Very much so.
Super did not even make the connection until the end credits.
It's when they do talk about how old the scientist was when he died, and they say, "Yeah, he's 41." Oh, that is really old. I was like, "Oh man, I'm just gonna collapse into dust over here."
I mean, yes, but also they're dumb teenagers.
When you're 16 years old, 40 is incredibly old.
41 sounds like you might as well be dead.
Yeah.
I think Matthew Broderick is a fantastic choice in this movie.
Yeah,
like because he plays the energetic, talented loner type kid quite well, but you get little glimpses of his sort of impish Ferris Bueller appeal coming out.
But he's
here and there.
He's also really kind of introspective. When there's some heavy scenes in this movie when they go to Faulkner's, and Faulkner it basically is like, yeah, the dinosaurs got wiped out and it all worked out after that. Maybe our turn is up, and Matthew Broderick does the impassioned speech to convince him that he should help them save the world. Mm-hmm. And then they're like, well, fuck this guy and go look for a boat, and end up making out on the beach because like, he's like, I don't know how to swim. I thought there'd be more time to learn how to swim. It's a surprisingly like the idea,
dark, fatalistic kind of.
Yeah. And the idea that you'd rather not know, like he's like, I wish I didn't know. I wish it was like everybody else out there that didn't know the world was going to end in 7 hours.
Yeah.
And it's funny because that actually, like, I don't think they realized that this was a thing that had happened at the time the script was written. But in 1979, there was a simulation that got fed into before the 1980. They used to run the simulations on the actual hardware you used to launch the nukes, which seems like probably a bad idea in retrospect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And somebody's fed a simulation into the network and almost started World War III in 1979. The National Security Advisor was on the phone and authorizing second strike capability and the whole thing. They hadn't gotten to the point that they woke up the president yet, but like he was reported as saying, "Hey, I didn't even bother waking up my wife because I figured she'd rather not know that she had 9 minutes to live."
That's heavy.
And yeah, like it's intense. It's an intense
that's pretty
movie.
Heavy. And also, I'm glad to hear you describe that because, like, it's not I don't hold this against the movie, but one of the aspects that really does sort of make you, it forces you to suspend your disbelief a little more than usual, is the part where everybody in NORAD just keeps going along with this data and never questioning, even after they've known that they've gotten bad simulation data once.
Oh,
they still spend half the movie continuing to consume that bad data and believe that it's real. Like, at some point you're just sort of like, come on, like, would they really not figure out that this is all like vaporware?
So
but then hearing that happened in real life, kind of, it's like, you know what? Okay, yes, reality actually is that ridiculous.
If you want to not sleep for a few nights, go read the number of times that we had near misses with both the Russia on both sides. Russia, like there was one that was like a 1980 or 81 where some kid in a missile silo had the launch order and he had a bad feeling about it, so he didn't do it. Right. Like the opening where 20% of the people in the silos wouldn't turn their keys because they wanted to be sure is a real thing that was a real problem, which is one of the reasons they justified having massive like overbuilding of nuclear missiles. So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, the same thing happened in the Soviet Union, like right after this movie came out, like the famous dead hand incident.
Yeah.
Where the launch officer basically like kind of refused to go through procedure out of skepticism about how valid the order was, and it turned out in fact not to be valid.
Well, and then again at the end of the movie when the General Behringer, I think is his name, is the character's name, like they realized it was a simulation. They pull everything. They pull the bombers back. They pull the submarines back. But by that point, WOPR had already been connected to the silos, and the computer is intent on firing the missiles. And he's like, "Well, shit, I got to call the president and tell him we might have to go through with this thing anyway." And it's very reminiscent of Dr. Strangelove, which is like the template for this side of the movie, the nuclear side of the movie, kind of.
It's another movie I have not seen.
Oh, good God.
I know.
Dr. Strangelove's real good. Like, I guess my point is people get in when you're in a situation where people are told what to do, a lot of times people just do it. Right. That's the, Stanford prison experiment. I always get that mixed up with the other one that was bad that they did at Stanford. But anyway, like people will follow orders even if they're bad.
That is the one.
Yeah.
That's the infamous one where people become like awful authoritarians as soon as they are handed any amount of power. If there's one thing to make you pause and not just go through with the thing that you're being told to do, it's the knowledge that tens of millions or more people are going to die when you turn the key.
Well, yeah, John Spencer in the missile silo gets the good line. It's like, I want somebody on the goddamn phone before I kill 21 people. Who's the silo commander, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that has come up so many. It comes up in Crimson Tide. It was the exact same line. Like what's his name from French Connection and Lex Luthor, the first Lex Luthor,
Gene Hackman.
Gene Hackman tells Denzel Washington, "Turn your keys, sir," while he's pointing a gun at it. It's the exact same scene. It's very good.
Right. Yes. Yeah. We watched Crimson Tide last year for the Watchcast, and watching that was a good primer for this because I saw the whole, order comes in, you got to like snap the card in half, like turn keys at the same time, authenticate codes, the whole thing.
So, a couple of interesting things. The writers actually went to NORAD and took the tour. And met the general in charge of NORAD, who found out what they were making the movie about. They gave him the gist, which is like a computer takes control of the missiles and goes crazy. And he was like, I sleep much better at night knowing I'm in charge of this instead of some damned computers.
Sure.
And they got pretty good access. Now nothing was actually shot at NORAD. The set they shot the exteriors in New Halem, Washington, in an old gravel pit, like the tunnel. They made the tunnel.
Oh, that tunnel's great.
So it's interesting because I couldn't tell if the tunnel looks like the NORAD tunnel or if a lot of NORAD tunnel pictures on the internet actually just use the shot from WarGames. Real NORAD's in Cheyenne Mountain, Colorado, the first place to get nuked in the world should the Russians decide to attack us. I think it
isn't the whole idea that it's like hardened enough or underground enough to survive?
It was hardened enough or underground enough to survive dropped bombs, but not 30 ICBM shots hitting it back to back.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Like that, the lesson of the ICBM era is that nothing is hard enough to survive ICBMs because there's so many warheads that you drop 3 or 4 at a time and it works anyway. Grim. Yeah. But the set's incredible. The set that they built for this is incredible. They have the big, like all the way from like the big springs hanging from the columns so the floor is isolated from vibrations, the huge screens, all the like 50s style power plant looking control panels were all built for this movie. They won a technical Oscar, right, for the screens, I think.
Yeah, there's a little bit on Wikipedia about how they did the screens in the center. Those were all live while the actors were shooting, so like there's no special effects on those screens.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
They were using like newer super bright screens they were projecting from behind onto these super bright screens that were bright enough for the camera to just capture what was on the screen.
Oh, that's awesome.
So the actors actually had something to react to. Colin Cantwell of Star Wars fame.
What?
The guy who did a lot of the original models the design models for Star Wars, not the final shooting models, but he did all the graphics. He did all of the nuclear computer display stuff in this?
Oh, that's where the HP 9845C came in, right?
Are you familiar with that computer? Because I looked that up as I was reading about this, and it looks amazing. It's like a desktop computer. It looks like, are those tape decks on there? It almost looks like, I can't tell. Yeah, the computer that he did the WarGames stuff on, the HP 9845C, it is a desktop computer. At least this picture on Wikipedia, it is a personal computer. But
oh yeah, it was a $39,000 computer for what it's worth.
Jeez,
holy cow!
It does not look that expensive, but sure.
It's beige.
It took 1 minute to render each frame of
that's pretty good
of the graphics. They had 50,000 feet of negatives of the computer graphics.
Wow.
And then, like I said, they 16 millimeter projected from behind, like rear projected onto those big screens. And then it works. Like they look quite good. They look like it looks like it's actually happening in there.
So it looked so good that the generals in charge of NORAD saw the movie and they were like, hey, we got to upgrade our stuff. If it can look like this in the movies, we can make it look like this in real life. And then they upgraded the entire war room in real life, apparently, as a result of the movie.
Everything about the look of this movie is amazing. Like the NORAD stuff looks suitably like retro futuristic, and they handle the graphics really well. There's also, this is just a me thing, there's also the aspect of like, I entered public school right around the time this movie came out.
Mm-hmm.
So all of the corduroys and like that scene in that diner or the arcade where, like the brown tables and trays and everything's brown, everything just looks, this is like such a nostalgia thing for me. All the fashion,
high-waisted khaki pants,
the stripes, his green striped collared shirt. It's all so 80s. And all the stuff in his room, I mean, that MSI, we've talked about this before, that MSI 8080 is practically a like fetish object of early computing at this point, to the point that you can build repro kits of that thing now if you want to have one of those sitting on your shelf.
Yeah, that was an early 8086 processor PC. I mean, it wasn't that early at that point, I guess, but they ran CPM. There's a CIO.com article about the technology of WarGames. It's really good. We'll put it in the show notes. But like they used an MSI IKB1 keyboard that was programmable because Matthew Broderick couldn't type.
Oh,
so they would program in the sequences that he was typing into the computer as keyboard shortcuts, and then the keyboard would jam them into the computer.
Interesting.
They didn't actually use that computer to generate the shots on the screen. That computer that they used to generate the on-screen shots was a CompuPro System 8/16, which was another 8086 PC that ran CPM as well. And I assume that's because they probably didn't want to have fans on the set so they could get audio. So they probably piped that in from elsewhere.
What else does he have going on in his room here? 8-inch floppy disk.
It's like $15,000 worth of hardware, easy. Probably more when I realized what that HP cost.
Yes.
The 8-inch floppy disk. I never actually saw an 8-inch floppy disk in person, other than like a display. I don't think.
Ironically, weren't 8 inches also used in the nuclear command and control?
Until recently.
Very recently, just within the last few years.
Yeah. Well, the bits are big enough that cosmic radiation won't flip them, apparently.
Yes.
Can we talk about the modem?
Yes. I'm looking at it right now. Is that the modem on top of his monitor? It is, right?
Yeah. The modem's on top of his monitor. Yeah. I think Ali Sheedy puts the vocoder box on top of the modem at some point. You get a pretty good look at it, but it has all the switches to configure your there's no AT commands to set baud rates and stuff like that. At that point, you control it with dip switches inside or the big switches on the front.
Yeah, the switches on the front are labeled like AL, ST, RDL, DL, HS.
Yeah, it was a Sermatech 212A is the actual modem that was on the set. They rebadged it at IMSA, I think, because they wanted people to understand that they all work together. I don't know.
Okay.
It was a 1200 baud modem.
Could also be that they had rights to show the MSI name and not the other company. So we're like, hey, let's just get the most out of this.
Yeah, that's possible. I don't like it's a weird thing. They also used an acoustic coupler, which I assume is because they wanted people to understand that the computer was using phone lines. So they put the phone thing on the acoustic coupler, even though it wasn't actually necessary for that modem. It could plug in directly to the phone line.
Yeah. So I had never seen an acoustic coupler before and did not know that's what this was until I asked you, and like, yeah, is there a scenario like what he's doing where it would have been required?
Yeah. So there was a period of time where the only way to connect a modem to a computer was by connecting a speaker and a microphone to the speaker and microphone.
That
the
seems,
microphone and speaker of the headset.
That seems very subject to interference. Like somebody's hollering too close to the coupler.
Well, yeah,
or somebody's mowing the yard right outside or something. It seems like it would be rough to maintain a good connection.
Or like, I guess you have to remember at that point, Bell was still selling everybody phones and you weren't allowed to hook up non-licensed phones to the network.
Really?
But yeah.
Oh, wow.
Or I guess they were leasing people phones. I don't think you could even buy them. But
I didn't know that was ever a thing.
Oh yeah. That's one of the reasons they got split up, is because they wouldn't let people connect. Like the government forced them to let other people connect licensed, but not hardware that they sold. But like you had to have the right shaped phone to hook up to the coupler. You could also get ones that would clip on, that would kind of like bungee around the top as two separate pieces, I guess, if you had a Princess phone or something. But I don't think I ever actually, I've seen acoustic couplers, but never had to use one. I was well after that. I think the first modem I had was a 2400 baud modem probably. But yeah, there's some other stuff in that shot. It's an expensive bedroom. He has a dot matrix printer and just prints an incredible amount of paper. The vocoder is really interesting because that seems like it was completely faked in the movie. I don't know. Vocoders were another thing that you like read about in magazines and nobody ever actually had because it was kind of useless. But it like in terms of giving the computer a voice and making WOPR, the computer that's going to destroy the world, a character in the movie, the vocoder is absolutely vital.
Oh yeah.
It lets them have conversations with the computer and not just, as you know, Brad, there's nothing more boring than a shot of somebody sitting on a computer typing.
Mm-hmm.
So
and they do the same thing with the actors. It's all just in service to making the movie work. They have Lightman and Falcon both, when they are typing to WOPR, are sitting there reading out everything they're typing as they type it, right? As if there is actual dialogue between a human and a computer out loud.
They had a bunch of actual kids who were like what we would call now hacking. There wasn't really a name for it then. There's a guy named David Scott Lewis who was I think he claims he was the model for David Lightman. He was just one of the people that they talked to. They based the character of Lightman on a bunch of different people. It kind of seemed like, which makes sense, but they talked to Captain Crunch. They talked to Mitnick later, I guess. I don't know. They got a lot of the hardware from a guy named Todd Fisher, who was, I assume, active at the time. I couldn't find out a whole lot about him. He's a little quiet these days.
The bedroom hardware, you mean?
The bedroom hardware, the
interesting.
the and the floppy disk and all that stuff came from him, I believe.
Oh, that's interesting. I always just kind of assume like, oh, they just bought all that stuff. Like it just came out of the budget, but no,
you for that kind of stuff, especially like you're probably paying people to be consultants on the film.
Sure.
So they're providing the hardware as part of that consultancy, and probably also like writing the code. I assume that one of the computer guys figured out that they could program the keyboard to get over Broderick's inability to type, and like the computer consultants would have told them, hey, like nobody's going to have just a single login. You have to have a password and stuff like that too, or whatever. But then they bypass that just for instance, just so the movie flows.
Yeah. I would say that's probably the other thing up there with the thing I mentioned earlier about NORAD, like kind of uncritically believing all the simulation data they're getting.
Yeah.
The kind of ease with which he just logs into everything in the world is a little ridiculous, but it's like it totally makes the movie work, right?
But also like Mitnick is quoted talking about this film and saying that's the way it was in the early days.
That's fair.
There was a period of time early on when people would just plug a modem into their computer and not realize that it would pick up the phone when people called that number, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so depending on what OS you were running, you would just have full access to the machine with the moment you logged in, because it just shows up like a terminal. There's a couple of good scenes. The arcade machine I love that Galaga is his favorite game.
Yeah.
This is clearly the best of that era of arcade game.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
And he's actually good at Galaga in the game. Like he hits the challenging stage. He has two ships. He's like, they paid attention. The high score is a pretty good high score.
Isn't there a Galaga sound effect somewhere else in this movie, like maybe in the nuclear system somewhere? I thought I'd swear I heard an arcade sound.
I thought there was the dying ship sound, or the extra life sound, one or the other.
Yeah, I can't remember where that is. Maybe somebody can help us out.
The fact that at one point the general is like, I want to talk to the people that are going to get hit by the bombs first. Get them on the horn for me. And like he gets the first two people are generals, and the third guy is like a squeaky voiced, is like the Simpsons teenage kid working at the fast food place. He's like, oh, yes, sir. No, the CO's not here yet. And he smiles and like calms him down. Airman Darty is maybe my favorite big character in the movie, for sure.
Yeah. I was surprised that Lightman's kind of hacker friends didn't play a bigger role in the story. They just have that one scene. He's got
Belvin is one of the guys' name. Jim like and Belvin, I think.
Speaking of classic archetypes, you've got the slovenly nerd and the extremely uptight, like rude, socially awkward nerd.
High strung, probably on the spectrum. Hey, you told me to tell you when you were being annoying. I'm telling you, you're being annoying now. Yeah, it's a remarkable. That guy played a bunch of nerds. The guy who played Belvin, which I assume is that they started with Melvin and they needed to make the name nerdier. But he played a bunch of nerds in the 80s and then did a bunch of voice work. He played most notably he played Dexter's nemesis on Dexter's Laboratory for the entire run of that show. And then it started showing up in like indie movies lately. It's like the role of Falcon, like the surprise reveal that Falcon's alive midway through the movie, the way these kids are moving around the world, like the fact that high school kids are able to get from Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado back to Portland just by booking a plane ticket is kind of amazing. Because I think you'd have a hard time flying as a 15 or 16-year-old now.
Not if you're David Lightman and you can just log into Panhand's reservation system.
It's true.
Get yourself a reservation. The reveal that he is alive is like an amazing shot in the arm for this movie, because I did not see that coming at all.
No.
And like that's what makes this thing work, is that it's just got a lot of like well executed classic movie stuff in it, right? You know, like even before that, when there's kind of the detective montage almost of him tracking down everything he can find about Falcon.
Yeah, he's like going to microfiche libraries, using microfiche, and
like the breadcrumb trail of, you know, I think that's what his hacker friends tell him, right? Is they put him on to like, oh, well, there's a game in here called Falcon's Maze. Maybe your next step should be find out everything you can about this Falcon character. And then it's like a good little detective thing. And then, yes, that culminates later, like right at the moment when the movie could use a little more drama or needs something to move it forward. He sleuths his way into finding that, oh my God, this like famous computer programmer scientist guy is still alive.
Yeah, the tragic figure at the heart of the story. The other thing, you hit this there, just like with Sneakers, the real life hacking stuff is depicted really well. The phone freaking stuff, the using research about a person to figure out what their password is, the social engineering to get when he's in the principal's office and he's like, oh, I know where they store the passwords for the school grades computer, pulls out the little writing desk, and there's the classic list of, oh, here's all of the old passwords scratched out.
Mm-hmm. The grade changing thing also, I'm sure, like, was amazing at the time. Like
there was real fear. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the second I saw he was failing a class in this, I immediately knew, like, of course he's going to hack into the school and change his grade. Like, because it's such a huge trope now, but I'm sure at the time people were like, oh my God.
I didn't know anybody who did that. I don't think.
Like, did that? Is there a documented case of that happening?
I wonder if it's like D&D and Satanism, right?
Yeah. It's like, it is practically full on urban legend at this point that people used to do that. And I wonder if that ever actually happened in a recorded way.
Well, there's a case in 2022 of a principal changing students' grades for years.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's not exactly what we're looking for here, but also
somewhat different motivation. But yeah,
using the touch tones, recording the touch tones, and like the scene where he's looking around the exam room to find something he can use to free himself is like also how he socially engineers his way onto the tour bus and the whole thing. Like that tour bus experience was straight from when the two writers, Lasker and Walter Parks, Lawrence Lasker and Walter Parks went on the NORAD tour. It's a absolutely fascinating look at what hacking was like before we called hackers and before they were, this was before Mitnick. This was before Mitnick was vilified as destroying the fabric of society using computers and such a threat. He has to be isolated from all technology.
I know I kind of called out a couple aspects of this that maybe strain credulity a little bit, but like in general, there is nothing technical in this movie that really seems truly implausible. Like everything,
except for WOPR.
Well, even now, like I said, like now the idea of a computer that learns, that is fed a bunch of data and learns from it through iteration and then is put in charge of things it shouldn't be in charge of. Well, seems pretty plausible.
Fair. It just took 40 years for WOPR to catch up. At the time, WOPR was just a big box designed to look like a furnace with a guy sitting inside working an Apple II.
Yeah, yes, that's amazing that WOPR is driven. All the lights in WOPR are driven by an Apple II, and there's somebody in there doing that live while they're shooting it. But
the guy inside was Mike Fink, who's a special effects supervisor, and he was driving the panel with the Apple II.
Yeah, but just in general, his use of computers, his hacking into remote systems, all the foibles in the nuclear system, you name it, like anything technical in this movie is at least plausible enough to watch and enjoy the movie. It's all handled with at least a decent amount of savvy,
Well, and also, so I guess really, if we want to get down to it, the biggest lasting impact of this film is that it kind of birthed the modern computer security. Like there were people who were concerned about computer security for a good decade, 2 decades before this happened, from the dawn of ARPANET, right? But most notably, a guy named Willis Ware, who wrote a paper called "Security and Privacy in Computer Systems" in the late 60s. But this drew attention to it to the point that after a screening at Camp David, Reagan was like, "Hey, is this possible?" in the meeting about nuclear proliferation the next week, and tasked General John Vesey, who's the chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, to find out if it could really happen. He went back, looked at the research people had been doing, and was like, "Yeah, this problem is much worse than you think." Primarily based on the fact that the NSA had been doing it to Russia and China for a decade at that point. So, this spawned a national security directive called NSDD 145, which was the National Policy on Telecommunications and Automated Information Security Systems, which basically said, hey, if you're buying stuff for the government, you have to have somebody secure this. He tried to get the NSA to do that work rather than the CIA or FBI or whatever, because there was no agency for that at the time. It ended up getting changed later on because the NSA is not supposed to work in the United States.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. NSA and CIA aren't supposed to do work in the U.S. Some stuff changed after 9/11, Brad.
Well, do you mean like geographically? Like I'm sure the not on American citizens thing is part of the mission statement, but is that like literally can't do work in the borders of the country?
No. They're not supposed to do. They're not supposed to do counter-terror. Like the CIA, the FBI is supposed to handle counter-terrorist and counter intel and stuff like that inside the United States. The CIA and the NSA are supposed to do signals and work outside and signals and
interesting
intelligence outside. The NSA was not allowed to spy on American citizens until they got the metadata loophole in the 2000s.
Yeah, I knew that. I meant more like, there are like spies, foreign operatives in the country. That is an FBI thing.
That's an FBI thing. Now it's all under Homeland Security. So like the distinctions are a little wobblier is my understanding. I don't know if that's correct or not. But yeah, so yeah, but it did that, like that. Reagan watching this movie, because Lawrence Lasker grew up, his parents were Hollywood people, and Reagan came to cocktail parties at their house, so he was able to get a screening of the film at Camp David, resulted in the U.S. government taking cybersecurity seriously before there were really laptops on the market.
That's ridiculous. Like just the life imitating art aspect of that is completely absurd. The picture of Reagan in this threw me for a loop because so many movies fictionalize the president and cast an actor.
Oh, but he was just on the wall in the back of the office, the FBI office or whatever, right?
Yes. So for the president canonically in this movie to just be Reagan really like kind of hit me over the head. But also like Reagan is so associated with this era of nuclear fear that feels very appropriate.
Yep. So yeah, I think that's it. That's
well, we could talk through the final sequence. I think is probably where to end this.
Oh yeah. That's a good call.
It may be a little long, but it is very tense.
Well, it has some real ups and downs. Like hey, we figured out it's a simulation. We're all safe. Oh wait, what are those numbers? Bit is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, but like the kind of, I mean, everything's fine, but still the tension of these missiles are impacting in 20 seconds. We have a bunch of these bases on the line. Like, what's going to happen? Are all these people going to die? Like, you still feel the fear and the tension in the room, even knowing that none of this is actually going to result in mass death, right?
Yeah, it's intense. Barry Corbin's performance as the general here is really interesting because he's like Barry Corbin's folksy and genial.
Oh my God. Like the absolute archetype of the like cigar chomping Texas good old boy military official or cop or whatever.
Yeah. Well, and like the counterpoint between, hey, we might have just killed everybody on the planet, and I'm talking to that private in Alaska about whether he's been nuked yet or not, is a real, like it's a real hard line to ride. I think like if Barry Corbin doesn't play that exactly right, it doesn't work in any way at all. And I love like how he kind of like the hard swings that his character has from celebrating that we've made it to, hey, you should pick up the phone, General. And then, well, shit, it looks like we're gonna have to go through with this anyway, even though it's a mistake, is incredible.
Yeah, I was shocked how likable he turns out, or that character turns out to be by the end, which I think is a testament both to his performance and also to the script, because the cliche would be, and you expect this early on, the cliche would be that the general, the military guy, is the asshole warmonger who doesn't care if everybody dies and is pushing for some very risky or immoral action or policy, right? And the Dabney Coleman character, the scientist, is the guy who's like knows the truth and has it right and is the moral character and is pushing for the correct course of action. You know what I mean? And like by the end, it's kind of revealed to be the opposite, right? That like the military dude who thought humans should be in charge of this stuff was right all along. And the scientist guy is kind of the asshole for pushing for automating this system that should never be automated. Like there's no antagonist in this movie. The antagonist is the state of the world. Yes. Right? The antagonist is the looming threat of mutually assured destruction. And they keep setting up. They do a really incredible job with the script where they set up antagonists, or what you presume is going to be the antagonist. You know, it's the scientist it's the general who is in charge of the nukes. It's the computer guy who wants to automate everything. It's the scientist who's checked out and thinks we need another mass extinction to right planet Earth. And it's WOPR, right? It's the computer itself. Like there's a version of this movie where the computer is trying to kill, is homicidal versus apathetic and just trying to do its programming. That is a shit movie. It's a really terrible movie. Yeah. There's a version of this where Barry Corbin's character is a warmonger. There's a version of it where the computer guy does a bad hack to, cuts a corner and causes the destruction of the planet. It's really quite a beautiful script. Yeah, I guess there really isn't a truly villainous character in this movie, right? No, I mean, like Barry Corbin, when he's presented with pretty good evidence, reasonable evidence that it's all a false alarm, he backs down immediately. And it's like, well, right. Okay, we can still annihilate the hell out of them if we wait and see if the missiles hit first. Yes. Right. We don't have to launch before the missiles are supposed to start hitting. Yeah, like the Gene Hackman character in Crimson Tide, again, is the villainous version of the general in this, because he wants to launch at all costs, even with like very good evidence or at least reason for skepticism that they are not in fact supposed to launch. And like even the general in this, the guy who would be the warmonger here, like very, very much wants to avoid launching missiles.
Like the Gene Hackman character in Crimson Tide is really tough because like I look at that. It's been a long time since I watched that movie, but I remember that being a here's a person who's been shaped by this awful job he's been faced with for the entirety of his career. You know, he spent his entire career saying, yes, I can do this awful thing and kill millions of people if it comes down to it. And when he's presented with that situation, he's so locked in by his preconditioning that he can't get out of it.
I think that's a pretty good read on that character. And on top of that, he is an authoritarian and resents having his orders challenged. And
yeah, I think there's a racial component to it too, if I remember right.
Yes, there definitely is. But like, I think part of it is he wants to go through with the launch out of spite because
he doesn't want to be wrong.
Yes, he doesn't want to be wrong. And he's angry about anyone in his crew undermining his orders.
Cognitive dissonance, real nightmare.
Nobody like that character in this movie. Everybody is redeeming in some fashion.
Yeah. Even Kittrick, who's like the shitty programmer who comes up with the whole idea to hook the computers up to the turrets and is like clearly just worried about the impact of this failure on his career. Like there's a shot when Corbin's like, I got to call the president and tell him what's going on. And he looks at him like, what are you going to tell him? He's like, I'm going to tell him what's happening. It's like maybe he's the antagonist. I don't know. It's like I think it's a pretty remarkable film. I also the other performance I wanted to call out is Ali Sheedy does, as she said in an interview about this 20 years later, is I was really good at asking questions in this movie because I didn't have any idea what any of it meant because nobody knew anything about computers at the time.
Sure.
So she does the heavy lifting of exposition to explain by asking questions of Matthew Broderick to ask questions about computers and connecting to networks and modems and like how you do these things and all of the stuff that like at one point, I think during the grades hacking sequence, she says, is this real? And he's like, yeah, of course it's real. It's in the computer. And like, that was an entirely new concept for people at this time.
It's making me realize this movie probably was a tremendous number of people's first exposure to computers of any kind, right? I don't think we mention earlier how financially successful this was. It was the 5th highest grossing movie of the year.
Yeah, it made $80 million US, which was in the US market off of a $16 million budget, which is a lot then.
Like it was seen by a lot of people at the time. And I bet the vast majority of those people had never touched or even been in the room with a computer.
No. I mean, at the time, this movie introduced a lot of people to the idea that computers could do amazing things. But I bet my assumption is people were going this because it was a Cold War nuclear Holocaust thriller where the good guys, where the nuclear war lost. Maybe the nuclear war is the antagonist when I think about it. Anyway,
it absolutely is. Anyway, this final sequence, even knowing what was coming, I didn't know specifically that the tic-tac-toe thing was going to happen necessarily. But I knew at the end the computer was going to reject the idea of playing the game in the first place. Still, how they get there, I think, is like visually incredibly striking. Like,
yeah, getting
the tic-tac-toe up on the screen and seeing that iterate faster and faster, and then transitioning to doing that with the first strike scenarios. Like watching it go through all those different nuclear plans, seeing the winner none over and over and. Like it's like kind of poignant, honestly, like the way that it's executed. You do get the ridiculous Hollywood thing where a bunch of the computer panels blow up for no reason at some point.
He's using all the available power, Brad.
Yeah, of course. If you look, I've seen enough Star Trek. If you have computer panels on your set, you have to blow some of them up.
Yeah, it's Chekhov's computer panel is in full effect. The thing about that sequence is my favorite part about that is the scrolling list of names of the different gambits. Yes. And I didn't actually take the time to go up and look and see if like the Venezuelan gambit was a real thing, or if it was something that the writers made up because some of them were pretty funny. There was like
Far East strategy. I'm trying to scroll through here. I believe I saw in India, Pakistan.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Scenario in there. The Hong Kong variant. Oh, get out of the way, guy. Somebody's standing in front of the screen. The Sudan. Okay, the Sudan surprise has got to be made up for this
these
movie.
have got to be fake, right?
The Argentina escalation, the Iceland maximum.
These all sound like Hitman episodes,
They
right?
absolutely sound like Hitman levels or escalations or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Turkish heavy.
I do like a Turkish heavy. Turkish delight, no thank you. Turkish heavy, yes, please.
Anyway, yeah, like, I had kind of backed into this from having played DEF CON 15 years ago or whatever, but like just those big ass screens of watching vector versions of nuclear strikes and the big giant circles as they impact and stuff, like watching that play out faster and faster and faster is like super tense. And of course the conclusion, the wrap up is like amazing.
Oh, it's so good. I wonder if
yeah.
DEF CON still works. Probably does. 2006.
I started to download it right before this. I'm going to have to find out. I
just downloaded it.
Steam user reviews from like days ago. So I think probably it still does.
Very positive in the last 30 days. Yeah, I'd say we're probably okay.
Oh, last thing. I guess this is the last thing I'll say. Like you said, DEF CON, the hacker convention, is named from this movie. I never knew what DEF CON meant until this movie. It means it means defense condition. I knew what it stood for, or I knew what the purpose of the rating was. I just didn't know. I never stopped to think like where the actual term came from. Defense condition.
Wow.
So yeah,
I read a lot of Tom Clancy books in high school, so I was pretty aware of DEF CON. I think that's as good a place as any to wrap it up. WarGames.
This movie rules. I'm shocked, honestly, that like it, for as much hype and influence as this movie has had over time, like I was shocked that it kind of surpassed my expectations just in terms of being a good movie as well as executing all the technical stuff quite well.
Yeah. Having watched it every 15 years now, 20 years, it's amazing to me how much more relevant it was this time than the last time I watched it, probably is the thing that struck me.
There was definitely that lull post like 91 for a good while where people were like, well, nuclear Armageddon's probably not going to happen now, right? Now that one of the two superpowers is gone, probably be fine, right? And then here we are.
Well, but not just that, but the AI taking humans out of control loops and stuff like that, and replacing computers taking our gerbs and all that is we're in a weird place.
Yeah, we sure are.
WarGames, 1983, still relevant. It turns out.
Quite a movie. I'm impressed.
Brad, we're here and we're able to do things like watch WarGames and talk about it for an hour because of a few thousand delightful human beings who support our show via Patreon. So thank you, patrons.
Thank you, human beings.
Yes, we appreciate you. We will not take you out of the loop, but we will ask folks who like the show to support us by going to patreon.com/techpod, where for $5 a month, you too can get access to the TechPod Patreon, the fabulous TechPod Discord, the Patreon exclusive patron. You too can get access to the TechPod Discord, the fabulous patron episodes, which happen monthly. And if you want, you can get us to read your name every month on the show, every week on the show even. So thank you to all of our patrons, but thank you especially to our executive producer tier patrons, including Nick Johnston, Paddle Creek Games Makers of Fractured Veil, Andrew Slosky, Crimes, Bunny, Just Wedge 3.0, Joel Krauska, Twinkie and the Argonauts, David Allen, and James Kamek. Thank you all so much. And I guess that'll do it for us this week.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what people have to say about this movie on the Discord now that I have seen it.
Yeah, I am. I think we're also going to, due to popular request, we are going to turn, a few weeks ago, we turned the games channel into a forum on the Discord. Mm-hmm. So it's like so you can have like dedicated sub channels and sub conversations. And there's, look, it's weird. I don't know how I feel about it still, but people seem to like it. So we're going to do that to the movies channel as well. So we can have individual areas for people to talk about Oppenheimer and Barbie, and I guess also WarGames this week.
Yeah. Get in there so I can talk to people about maybe finally actually buying one of those MSI 8080 replica kits.
Ooh.
That I keep thinking about buying because it seems like the kind of thing that maybe won't get made forever, and maybe I should get one because it looks amazing. Now that I've seen this movie, I have an actual reason to do so.
Is there a WOPR kit?
Oh, I don't know. That's a significantly taller order, I think.
I don't want the full size one, but I want, WOPR missile code display.
I was sad to read that they broke that thing down after the movie finished production. I know movie props don't last, so nobody wants to store that stuff, but that thing is so cool.
Yeah, especially back then, people wouldn't have kept them.
Yes, but this 8080,
Well, I guess that'll do it for us this week. We will see you all next week. Bye, everybody.